is hot coffee, decaf, hot water from cheese in the back, along with some donut bowls. And there's a drinking fountain just out the door here, restrooms down the hall that way. This evening we are very lucky to have Professor Mike Whitty with us. He will be presenting Embracing Detroit, Visioning Woodward as a point of unity from Pontiac to the river. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Whitty.
Is this level mic on? Can you hear me good? Great. I want to start with a poem, an old friend of mine, Rockadox, the yoga movement. He wrote the Renaissance City Rhapsody. I speak of Detroit as a verb, not a noun. A fleet-footed city of great pulsations. A hard-beating, hard-bitten, hard-working town. A cauldron and a cradle of historic creations. Heart pumps loudly in this artery of the lakes. It's an engine-driven, music-famous, rough-hewn place. A city of survivors that's proud of what it makes. It wears sweat for a necklace and hope on its face. A flowing road with waterways and wraps its vibrant soul. Pleasure-minded, sports-blinded, Renaissance-obsessed. A multi-ethnic culture hub where hardships often press. Blessed despite it all with a dauntless human zest. A spirit lives within the city, transfiguring the dark. A secret vital essence that's the sum of all its parts. A body, a power fully capable of wonders once it starts. The spirit of Detroit consists of simple human hearts. See the wings arising from the boardroom and the street. The spirit of the Renaissance no shadows can defeat. The city has a soul reborn that many thought had died. Wherever you may be, my friend, spread the spirit wide. So tonight, I have chosen to emphasize the optimism and the possibility of the future Detroit 2030, 2050, 2100. Your grandchildren's maturity and the back end of their century, this one. And I want to use that framework to anticipate having half the night be a conversation together, a brainstorming session, a sharing, a dialogue. So you can bring your approach. Everyone has a different take on this topic. It's such a neat topic because, of course, we share a lot in common. Each of us have different visions and different perceptions, and that makes it interesting. So I'm going to do a couple of things kind of quick. At one point, Jack Wesson did a piece. We celebrated the 300th birthday of Detroit. In Our magazine, Jack interviewed me about Detroit 300 years from now. I was a futurist, and he was asking me a lot of tough questions. Would we have cars? Would we work? Deep things about the future of work, the possible future, the possible human. Oneness, higher consciousness. I did ended with the assertion that there would still be golf. That would hang in there. No matter what we did with driverless cars, or Motor City, or Motown music for that degree. So it's just kind of a fun topic that I've given many times, and each time a little different. I just want to say I've spent my lifetime here. I have good memories. I have a view that we have hurdles to face, yes, and I have problems, but they can be approached often as positive opportunities. Both large and small, we could reframe how we hold ourselves as a city. And when I use that word, ourselves, and the city of Detroit, I mean we live in greater Detroit. Well, all Detroiters at heart, those who live in Cleveland, in Chicago, and Wichita, and that's it. That's where you live. Wherever you can drive in 1 hour is where you live, except for seeing the kids jumping a plane for a vacation, being a traveling salesman. Most of us don't drive much more than an hour to Ann Arbor, and that's about as far as we go. So if you live within an hour of some place, that's who you are, for the most part, unless you move across many cities in a lifetime, or have special, activities as an orphan parent. You've got to go to the kids. I see us in a regional context. And I'm absolutely convinced, as a member of the World Future Society, this forecast is not hard to make, that we're going to have to operate more and more regionally. Sort of pioneers call it the bioregion. That Pioneers Conference every year in October at Marygrove's well worth noting if you want to look at the green future. So from that perspective, regionalism is inevitable because of technology and trade and human culture, as well as economics. You're just not going to be able to afford a Bingham Farms Fire Department and a Bingham Farms Police Department and all that overhead when you can have, just like you have a county sheriff, you can take care of it all in 4/5 of the public services on a regional basis. Like you have a regional hospital, you have a zoo for the region, right? You have the Detroit Art Institute for the region. Are the Red Wings for people in Shelby Township? Yes, they are. Fair enough. Do the people up in Baltimore like the Tigers? Yes, they do. And yes, do I predict that the Detroit Lions will win the Super Bowl someday? Yes, I do. Will I live to see the Detroit Lions win the Super Bowl? That's a harder call to make. But I'm hopeful, and I want to be optimistic, even about the Detroit Lions. So I'm just trying to set the tone to see how far we can take this. Again, like I said, I've just come in from the West Coast. I'm happy to be back here. I want to honor the memory of my birthplace, Pontiac, by evoking the name of my childhood hero, Chief Pontiac, and Hedges Wigwam on Woodbury, and much else. And there was something called a Pontiac, which you actually drove, with your key in the ignition, and you drove the Pontiac. So for me, Flint means something, New York City. And I hear that GM is going to import Shanghai Buick and sell it to Flint. I think, wow, globalization has affected everybody on this planet, and global Detroit is part of that globalization, with the ups and downs of trade debates and presidential debates and economic debates on jobs, inequality. So globalization, technology, trade, commerce, taxing, global mind, global media, and global Detroit. So I'm looking at it from the long view, and yet we'll talk about concrete short-term things as well. The French came here, the British were here, the Americans and Canadians are allies, but they have a fortified border like you wouldn't believe. And doesn't that hurt tourism for Ontario and Michigan? Shame on the notion that they have such a fortified border here with our best friends, the Canadians. Fur, lumber, farms, Ford, the ethnics and Southern blacks, and Motor City and Motown, the unions and civil rights, our love for sports. There's so many places to start. I'd like to start with the spirit of Detroit, from Pontiac to the river. The spirit of the river is the Native American sense of 4 directions, the elements. So I like to think that the spirit of the river runs deep in our veins. That's why I've taken the spirit name, not for Detroit. I think Detroit is literally reinventing itself. It's so amazing that it is literally reinventing itself. I have a number of invitations I'm going to make to you, but I have one in particular I'm proud of. You can get an invitation to a special Detroit music benefit from me tonight to discover one small community that is literally reinventing the neighborhood, reinvigorating the old working class neighborhood along 7th John R. There's a long history with the fairgrounds and Poplar Park and so forth. I'll talk about that more. But just if you see the city is reinventing itself, you don't have to be particularly discouraged or doubtful of the future of the city. That's a key item. Berlin is a big
hot town right now in Europe. It's one of the leading edge cities of Western Europe. But Berlin in 1945 had to be built back from scratch. Are you with me there? So Pompeii or whatever, either you let it sit like the train station, or you redo it like Gilbert has downtown. And that goes right to the boulevard. And they're doing some speed link bus that will come right up to Pontiac. And I enjoy riding the buses on the Muni and the BART in San Francisco. I enjoy being packed in with all those San Franciscans. It's a very diverse city, especially when you're in close, like the subway in New York. And I thought, my God, here I am riding the bus as a matter of fact, and getting on the subway and up close with everybody, and they believe me. San Francisco's got more characters than we do. And yet they're fun most of the time. Occasionally a little startling, but most of the time okay. Which is to say, most of the time, most people are good and can be trusted if you give a little friendship and a little smile to a stranger. That may be your best assurance of a good time passing the channel of life. Your neighbor, for you, believes a stranger is actually your neighbor. You ask the question, who is your neighbor? We understand that to be everyone's our neighbor, right? So, just think of the innovations that are occurring right now, and how we go back to some old-time traditional values like community building. We could take some of Richard Florida's best thinking of our city. He's the author of The Rise of the Creative Class, the exciting dynamic that creativity builds a city, builds an economy, builds the kind of attractions that great cities have always had. And that is something that occurred to us many times in economic history. Of course, most famously, the automobile industry, and engineering and technology. But even now, there's new art. Many people are coming from around the country, Brooklyn, the West Coast, for a career here in our lofts, a career here in a cultural campus that is accessible to young artists. We have other things that are happening, like the urban gardens. A lot of young people are literally choosing to live in Detroit and seek work in Detroit. From our suburbs and from around the country. It's most amazing to meet people who are couch surfing their way through the USA from Europe, or be at some spot in Detroit. Find out that people are visitors from Canada. They've chosen Detroit as a city they're curious about. They want to see it, they want to visit it. So there's a whole bunch of folks under 40, especially the 20-somethings, are millennials, have a totally different relationship with the city than we grew up with. We, meaning the generality of Oakland County. There's better harmony between young black and white folks than I've ever seen in quite some time in a long history here in the city. So yes, we've had trouble with deindustrialization, white flight, and most damaging of all, sprawl. That is what makes density so difficult. And density is critical for community. Density leads to interesting neighborhoods. Hamtramck is an interesting place because it's dense and intact. So they have hundreds of artists in Hamtramck from the College of Creative Studies, graduate students from Whitty. And so Hamtramck is a little enclave of diversity. Muslim majority on your city council. And a whole bunch of artists. And every other ethnic group you can dream of and think of is represented in Hamtramck. So it does require a little bit of density and color and neighborliness. But you need to be able to walk and now bicycle maybe, so as to slow down enough that have time for your neighbor. If it's just jumping out of your driveway and jumping back in the garage at the end of the day, you don't even know the people at the end of the block. Sometimes that happens in my neighborhood in Birmingham. because nobody has any time for any of their neighbors anymore. We're all so busy. As my mother used to say, I've got to rush to the cleaners. Now, I'm reflecting on my mother's comment from the 50s. I wonder, why do I have to rush to the cleaners? What if I leisurely walk to the cleaners? What if the cleaners was walkable? Now, granted, you're at the stage in life where just walking, just being able to stand up before you and walk out of here. Okay, so Richard Florida has a great book. There are a couple other really interesting books. This is another fact, really cool on New York. The Moral Economy, How Fashion, Art, and Music Drive New York City. This author argues from an urban development policy point of view that culture, not the banks and the insurance companies, are what really gin up the town, keep the young people home, and make it an attractor of corporate recruiting. So this is what Richard Ford urged. The Chamber of Commerce, when he came here to consult, said, you people don't think well enough of yourselves. I like your town. I like your music. And I'm up in San Francisco, and I call myself Dr. Detroit. I never get grilled and beat up for being from Detroit. Occasionally someone will ask, how you doing, with a suggestion, and on a deathbed or something, stage 4 pancreatic cancer kind of thing. But most of the time, not at all. I think we are way too tough on ourselves. And when I say we, I don't mean us here in the room. I mean my 3 local television stations that are way downbeat, way downbeat. They'll get me all the blues in the world. They'll get me the saddest stuff every night. I don't get my Mother Waddles. I don't get my Happy Times. I don't get my Focus Hope. I don't get any kind of optimism. But I sure get my shootings. No, get my generous helping every night. So no wonder people in Shelby Township have a kind of brainwashed view of the region, not through their own fault, just the fact they turned on the television set. So I see that as one of the last institutions that has to come aboard. Corporate Detroit has come aboard. Thanks to Gilbert, took a guy from Cleveland to get the old wealth of big-time corporate metro to jump back into the lead and do their leadership part. They're the makers and doers. Many of you have had professional careers. We've got them here in Birmingham, and most of the good work that is being done to shape-shift the region really is corporate, for the most part. Interfaith work, yes. Interracial work, yes. A mayor that can bridge Big Nile without the help of M&M. He can be like Duggan from the Oakland County perspective. And so I think Birmingham could be kind of a thought leader on the Woodward corridor. To step up just a touch more. Community House is going in the right direction. A lot of groups are working on Woodward in particular. There's something called the Woodward Avenue Action Association. There's the 8 Mile Business Association. But we have to make that step further. We have to make youth colonies of milestones. We have to make Woodward a spot where a kid from St. Clair County or a kid from Novi or Howell says, you know, I'd rather live in Royal Oak than Howell. I'd rather live in Ferndale than Novi because it's night and day. There's something about our baseline suburbs and Birmingham is such a well-educated community. And I mean, those of you who live in this general area, you have to literally be in the city. Those of you who are in this north-south access of Pontiac to the river. We have the old main line and the main street, and it's a unifying metaphor. So we have the opportunity to be thought leaders and say, come back in, don't move further out. Because remember, sprawl is like a python when it comes to the center of the city, like Rome, Paris, Detroit. It's all extended into cul-de-sacs. You kill the city, as humanity does. Remember, it was the rise of the city that brought industrialization and modern economy and standard of living that allowed people to live maybe to their 90s, certainly to their 70s, instead of die off in their 40s and 50s, as was common 200 years ago. They have hospital systems like Roma and history. They have the world we've taken for granted and enjoyed and prospering for the most part. We should be very thankful for our good fortune. So this is an interesting approach to the topic. And this is my favorite Detroit book. Detroit City is the place to be by Mark Minnelli. Very interesting, upbeat. If you like the nooks and crannies and a little history, then these are two titles that are not so well known, and yet they're kind of special. Let me just walk you through a couple ways of looking at some topics just to whet your appetite, and then we'll just sort of open the floor and have a good discussion together. Do a SWOT analysis on a couple key items for you. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we have a talent index for Detroit. I view that as a strength. We have a lot of talent here, a lot of engineers, and a lot of artists. We have a tolerance index. I think it is a weakness, but I'm optimistic it's getting better because the millennials and the generation is exposed to diversity. Doesn't choose to self-segregate as they've allowed this role to us. I feel there's some hope there, but it is a weakness, no question. On the other hand, from a global perspective, working along okay from a global perspective. I'd like a little bit more, but I must concede that most people would view it as a weakness. The technology index, that's a strength. We now bring everything global technology. It's not about regional. It's about how we do things. Not all the technology I'm totally keen on. I hate to reduce life to texting. I'd like to believe it's more to life than texting. Some of you I know were born before they invented texting. How many of you are pre-texting? I'd like to be able to have you call me and hear your voice on the phone. I'd like to hear my mother's voice, right? I'd like to be able to hear my brother's voice, even though we're texting. That's another talk on another night. We'll field day with that. A couple more indexes. The brain drain and the brain gain index. Maybe we're turning that around. In time for you to enjoy some grandchildren who live here. You don't have to go to Chicago for a job after getting out of the UNM. So I think we're getting a little bit more respect in the national media. So for some, Detroit's an interesting place to be hired into from Boston. And I haven't quite convinced all my San Francisco friends to come visit me for holiday in Detroit. But you know we can show a good time to anybody in the summer months here, right? No question about it. And so, I'm really optimistic that it's an opportunity. This is an interesting place. If you're a little nervy and a little edgy, you can have an even more interesting time. And it's easier to sell that to young people under 40 than people who are a little more set in their ways. And that's okay. That's part of being human being. And then the inequality index, it is a weakness for the region. There was a hot debate there between Bernie and Hillary the other night. It's being handled in different ways by different candidates, by both parties. And it fed into the energy and to the concern that subject inequality brings up. Hope comments about the poor, Trump comments about getting non-voters to come out and vote, getting people involved instead of being totally non-voters. So people from very different perspectives in life are addressing the question, not always getting the same piece of the big pie, but they take a slice, an approach. So the free market economists who are sophisticated, they're beginning to say, oh, that's right? You've got to keep people shopping, you've got to keep some credit, you've got to keep debt manageable. We just can't squeeze everyone to death, and there'll be no more customers. So even the conservative camp has, in the wisest moment, realized that they need to look at this and study it. They have a conservative approach to a solution. We should advance it, and perhaps in some cases, a better solution. So, it's beyond the partisan election here. Possibility that this economic inequality is not going to lead to Detroit at all. It's a global problem, not just a U.S. election issue. It's really a global problem. And it's not going to be readily solved, but it's on that index for a Detroit report. And then the overall creative class rank. It comes off of Richard Florida's book, Rise of the Creative Class. Now, he's been disputed. He's an urban economist from Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, consultant to cities. So he had this argument that I just mentioned was made by this woman about New York City, that the inventors, the tinkerers, the Tom Edisons, the Henry Fords, the Silicon Valley, the Astor's, taxi, the apps, all of that, the inventions and the innovation and the creativity, creative classes, are important for commerce, for being competitive, hiring the best, and keeping them happy in the region where they've been hired, but keeping people at home looking for work where they grew up. But it is something that lifts the regional economy and its competitiveness, and therefore enhances the preservation of those things we wish to preserve and value as a city or as a region. So I thought that's, and there it is a little bit of a weakness. We've got to honor that and notice that and beef that up a bit in order to feel good about ourselves, to have self-esteem as a region, and not be apologetic or defensive, let alone fearful and angry. We just have to ease up on our fear. Fear for ourselves, fear for our health, fear for our death, fear, right? I'll never forget teaching the 6th in Livernois, 40 years at Detroit University, MBA night school. Some student made some, and got out of 10. Kept the class at 8. And they were a little like, it's dark, I don't know if I want to walk in my car. And I said, wait, do you realize that you have to worry about walking to your car? You have to worry about the Detroit expressway system, getting you back safely in your car. We're under more risk when we're driving in these cars or riding in these cars than any other scenario that I can sketch for you. We're simple creatures. And sometimes we get used to things that are high risk, like driving on 696. Consider that a very dangerous ride, 696 with those lanes, people cut to the city and stuff. You know what I mean? I'm not in a racetrack. Why am I out here in a racetrack? I'm not at a NASCAR driver. What's going on? 696. What is it called? The rat race? Something like that? The rats that walk. Our sense of what's really scary was a little bit perceptual, a little bit in our own head, a little bit off the mark from a statistical and analytical perspective. From an engineer's mind, it's out of whack. And Bruce got himself all jittery. My television set made me that way. My television set keeps doing Halloween to me, keeps throwing me scary stuff. And no wonder I'm jangly about this and that, in my car, getting out of my car, walking in my car. I'm all jangly. But when I'm in my car, I'm in real risk. And turning music on, and also equally dangerous activities in the car, distracting myself. So I too am becoming a hazard to the others as well as myself. So I have some strange frames of reference, like moss, creep around us over a lifetime. And we don't even notice they're there, but they determine and control our way of thinking. But to me, global Detroit is actually a city of talent with tolerance and technology. And I think that's to be highlighted and we feel better for it. Our talent is in high tech and the arts. We have real people power. We do get along in the city. We do appreciate the diversity if we see the contribution of immigration, the kind of world power that we are. And it's perfectly obvious. We need to be here. We didn't have immigration in the United States. The colonists, the French, the Spaniards, everybody else who's come. So Hamtramck is always a delight. When I've been in Hamtramck, I'm thinking I go from St. Florians, Monaco, and Conception, and then the Bosnians, and the Albanians, and the Yemenis, and the Bangladeshis, and what an interesting community the Bangladeshi community is. It goes on and on like that. You know, the whole thing is, the whole world is a diverse and colorful family. And if we think of it that way, we have a very all the great explorers, and traders, and diplomats, and world figures who are well-traveled and reasonably sophisticated, who are out to make friends so they can make deals, trade, maybe approach somehow business. It's the nature of the beast, so to speak, in terms of human behavior. So I think we're getting toward a live and let live philosophy. And I'd rather, in the area of tolerance, say that cups half full. Especially if we can get people just to the point of live and let live. It's not asking you to love it all, but hold it down, walk around in somebody else's shoes, look for your common ground, and if you're friendly, you can meet people from any walk of life, and it's amazingly simple. But try being more friendly. If you come away from tonight with nothing else, if you try to smile and be friendly, and introduce yourself to a stranger and ask them where they're from or something, or just nod and give a little sign of respect, that brings your odds right up. Both close interpersonal, just walking the streets. Friendliness is something we have and a natural asset. It's a sure way for success in life, and self-realization. It should bring your heart into marriage with the mind.